What's up guys, it's the Devil's Talon here, and in today's video we have another installment of viewer VOD reviews. Today we're going to be taking a look at Binsniffer and how his trio performed in Fortnite Championship Series Opens. But guys, before I do get into this video, if you do want me to continue with this series, I'm going to need VODs to review. If you are interested in having your gameplay reviewed, please DM me on either Instagram or Twitter, and those social links are going to be down below in the description. And again guys, before I get into this analysis, if you do enjoy my content or find what I'm telling you helpful, please drop a like on this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on post notifications. But without further ado, let's get right into the video. Alright, so we got first moving zone and we're in a great position. We have 2 bouncers, 5 shocks on Sniffer. Fall Guy has no mobility, and Maxima has 2 bouncers. So significant amount of movement, around 7 bouncers. They have a favorable side, like a favorable-ish rotate, because they're going to be more on dead side. Now, this is where I think things are, it's a little bit questionable to go early one here, and now we're just in a heap of builds using materials when we have 5 shockwaves to play with. I just would not understand why we're not bouncer shockwaving when Storm touches our back. And we're actually going to get solo wiped right here, going into a bunch of congestion, losing a good position, which we really had. If we go back and see where they were, they had so much green grass in front of them. As we spectate this other player, let me just go back a little bit. So we have mobility, and we do use a little bit of it, but they're not maximizing it, especially on this position of high ground. If they bounce or shock, they can get so much further than where they were. Notice again how there's kind of like 2 clusters and a bunch of open space. And notice how that team is bouncer shockwaving. Now they're doing it a little bit too early. But waiting till zone hits your back and then bouncer shockwaving to really maximize it. But now notice how we're going early and zone isn't at our back. We risk getting tagged, and they kind of gone into all the open area. If they bounce or shockwave this, they don't deal with all this congestion. And now going early, this is what ends up happening, right? They run into all this congestion, and then they end up getting pinched essentially. So they end up getting pinched. Now if they waited to storm again and bounce or shockwave, they get further and they don't have to worry about getting pinched because all these people are moving, are basically worried about moving. They go early and then they kind of get stuck in the middle. This is a situation when you have that a good amount of elevation and you have bouncer shock to definitely use it. Using the bouncer there just didn't really do anything too well for them. They were on dead side. It was a good like position, a good positional rotate, but they didn't maximize their movement items. They had bouncer shock. Bouncer shock would have probably, from their level of high ground, almost gotten them, and instantly they would have saved mats and gotten further and avoided all this congestion and avoided getting wiped with 35 people with tons of placement points. I mean, dying with that amount of shockwaves is tragic, so we got to make sure that we maximize the movement when that is something I definitely think this trio needs to work on. So now we are sitting in first moving, and again we're up in a good position. We're at elevation, and we also kind of have a split job coming with Fall Guy kind of holding over there. Now this should be an easy victory royale with 13 opponents left, including the trio. So only 10 opponents to worry about. Now we sit here and go to first moving and we start tarping. Now look at our loadouts here. We have 4 shocks. We have no movement, and then we have 5 crash pads. So notice how we just build over. So we're using a ton of mats when we don't have to. The immediate play should have been to shock over to these old builds, and you're gonna see it cost their lack of using movement items. They are doing a good job of fragging while on the high ground, but they should. However, they're all going to burn through their mats and not use their mobility at all, as you're going to see at the end. Let's take a look at Binsniffer's POV. So notice they're up a little bit now to basically high to be very comfortable, but good decision to go down. And then they get another zone that pulls back towards their old tarp. So again, they can get a little bit of movement. However, they have 4 shocks and a bunch of crash pads. Now we're sitting at 140 mats because we've used so much. He's got 12 builds. Fall Guy has 40 builds, a ton, and Maxima 29. So these should be taking over Tarp. Also notice how we're not playing ahead. Notice how we're sitting back and kind of spraying. We don't really have an angle. If we play ahead and play in front and start shooting back is what we should be doing. We're still... Binsniffer is doing a little bit better job. Now decides to jump down and frag. But only having 13 builds. Gets a nice crack. They're doing a good job of pressuring. Let's take a look. But notice how we're not ahead in pressuring. And someone makes a good shockwave play. But we have 6 builds. Great job right here to get this impact. But we don't have mats. But we have so much mobility. We burned all of our mats. If they had started playing more ahead with their mobility to save their mats, it would have been good. Mobility usage is probably the biggest thing this trio needs to work on. I've seen it now twice in games where their movement was either not used or not maximized. Maximizing your movement is absolutely crucial. If they would have shocked ahead, they could have pressured the whole lobby back on those old builds and saved a ton of materials that they wasted building over, as well as the fact they had crash pads to get ahead and then use your mats to get up and hold. Now, sitting, and they kind of never really got too far ahead and pressured, or there was some sitting in the back and spraying. If you get one ahead and one can pressure, they burned a ton of materials even though they had so much mobility. They died with shockwaves and crash pads, which is again never good. You want to make sure you're using these movement items and then again maximizing. So as I've stated again, the biggest thing this trio has to work on is maximizing and using movement items when they have them to the best of the ability that it can provide. This is going to be an example of a poor rotation. Now, the actual execution of the rotation isn't the issue. It's being a little bit too greedy, number one, and just basically a big error that's going to cost a ton of utility. Now, Fall Guy here is going to get picked off, and there's no excuse just because of the rotation. They're going from elevation to de-elevation to be put in an excellent spot. So let's take a look at the other loadouts. We have a spaz and 3 bigs and 3 crashes. We have 4 shocks and a spaz. And then we go back to Fall Guy. We have a spaz and 6 bouncers. Now we have a ton of utility. We need to make sure that we stay up. And there's no excuse on this rotate to not stay up. But let's end up and see what happens. So Fall Guy ends up rotating, going from elevation to de-elevation. You can see that he saw that those opponents were there with a snipe. We should be rotating with our blueprints out, but going for a snipe here doesn't make any sense, and it ends up costing us humongous. He was max mats, so we've now lost pretty much a third of our materials, 6 bouncers and a big and 6 minis, just from being a little bit overzealous and greedy. All he needed to do was run with his build outs, block off that side, get in and get established, and this opponent, or in his opponents, wouldn't have basically triple sprayed him if he wasn't out in the open taking a snipe in the middle of a rotation. When you are rotating, your prioritization should be rotating. You should be thinking, I need to get in, and that's all I care about. Once you get in, you can start thinking about looking for snipes or frags or whatever, even though they really didn't need them at this point. They were absolutely set for endgame. And now this is going to be an example of another poor rotation. Now the decision to take this rift early doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons. One, you have teams already established and you're flying in on, and this is where more people are, as you can see. Notice how there was very little people over where they were. And then we get fried, and then the team from below us hears that we get fried and we get pushed, and we get one pumped immediately, and we're all absolutely cracked, and Maxima gets away, and then Binsniffer goes down. Now, this rotation doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. One, we already know that we're on a more dead side of the map. If you were to cut this circle in half based on location, if you were to cut it in half, we were over here where there's only basically 2 teams. If you cut it in half, most of the teams are going to be on this side because it's a far west zone. So everyone's already pushed in, going to be funneling in to the left side of the semicircle if we were to cut it in half vertically. Now, we fly over to that side to alpha a team. Now, I may not mind that decision once circles started closing. Doing it when the circle is idle is a humongous mistake because everyone that's already established is going to fry you. They don't have to worry about it. Now, here's what I say when the first zone is moving. Imagine that these teams here haven't improved their position when the zones move. When the zones move, these teams that are already established are going to focus them because they're not in zone and you can hold them and they're free points. Now, since you're doing it early, they're going to focus you because you're in the air flying unprotected. There's nothing you can do. And as you can see, 2 fried and we're left with 34 HP if we were fortunate enough to get those 2 minis off, which he does a little decent job of staying alive, but ends up dying in half and half before even getting to half and half. Now imagine if they go, let's just go back for a second. Imagine if there's 2 things we could have also done besides waiting to take that rift. We actually don't have to take the rift at all in this situation because, well, it wasn't necessary. Notice how everyone is pretty much in front of us. And look how short our rotation is to get to zone. Now, I like maybe the aggressiveness of the power position, but we're going again from elevation to de-elevation, and look how uncongested this entire side of the map is. There's only 36 teams. If you want to alpha this, then fine, I understand. But make sure you're doing it when the circle is moving, so again, you do not get as hard focused. And again, they could have simply just continued to walk up and play half and half. They have crash pads. They have, I think crash pads is the only thing that they have between the 3 of them. Nope, they have crash pads and shocks. So moving to half and half is not an issue. There's not a big reason to alpha this congested side of the map. It's just not a smart rotational decision. And the execution of the rotation was just poor because of the fact of when they decided to use the rift. The absolute best play, in my opinion, would have been to simply funnel in and get established right here at the edge because it is least congested and makes your rotate not that bad. You wouldn't have gotten fried by the entire lobby because the entire lobby's on, again, as we said, if we were to cut this zone vertically, most people are going to be already in front of us because everyone has to funnel in that way for the most part, right? And we've seen that in the minimap. That's exactly what happens. Notice how we're flying into a really congested part. There's already 2 teams established and there's a bunch more teams on edge waiting to get in and get established. There's teams down below that also would have to funnel in. It just doesn't, it's not a smart rotation decision. So in the future, just make sure when rotating to really think about map position. Okay, everyone's funneling in. We don't need to go to that side, especially if we have that free rotate in front of us. We don't have to take the rift. Not taking the rift there in that situation would have been a much better play in my opinion. So this is going to be an example of being isolated and lack of awareness, which unfortunately due to their drop is kind of a double-edged sword. If they're split dropping, you're going to be isolated, and notice how his teammates aren't even on the map, and a lack of awareness while basically farming gets him absolutely fried and gets picked off. Now this is basically eliminates any chance of a res. This is something you're going to have to be extremely aware of what's around you if you are split dropping, and sometimes there are players that get too isolated, like this exact point. They're going to get shaken, but they're going to realize, oh my god, this trio is so far split. So, unfortunately, unfortunate for this trio, but this is again an avoidable mistake. If you are split dropping, you have to make sure that you are 150% aware of who's around you, what's happening. Now, awareness there is like, okay, there's a POY dirty there. More than likely, my engagements are going to be coming from there or start. So I would be making sure if I'm at that position to be like, okay, I know that there's going to be possible teams rotating this way. I need to make sure before I continue to loot that direction that I'm aware of where opponents are so I don't get picked off. And then again, you're going to see later on in the exact same actual location where a person gets absolutely fried being a little bit too isolated from the team in the exact same area, and unfortunately again results in them dying earlier than they should have. This is going to be another example of how being isolated in trios is not ideal because it can get you focused and fried. And notice we're back at the same place. However, this is much later in the round than as opposed to normal or the first time. So let's take a look. We have good, decent loot. We have big pots and we have a pump AR. Nothing too crazy, but let's take a look down to the bottom right of your screen. We have a trio upcoming here that is playing extremely tight. Notice how tight they are, and they're going to get a spray. Now notice how we have one person way up here, even though it's on a good elevation for pitching, and then we have someone that's a little decent ways away but down by the river. So now he is now isolated, right? And so we're going to see what ends up happening. We get fried down to 5 HP. And things get a little bit scuffed right here as well. So I don't understand this decision as well to kind of just back off and build wildly, especially with how weak we are trying to preset. Just box up and reset all your walls and then worry about the preset and get your heals off. So again, the isolation frying off all that shield just starts the fight horrendously, and then Fall Guy just basically panics, falls back, pre-edited builds, and then it's basically a 3v2. Maxima gets cracked. Fall Guy does come and make a recovery, get a kill to get some HP, but then Maxima gets knocked, and so they're going to be at health advantage, and it's a GG's. And just staying tighter together can basically avoid this. And again, you could maybe get those chug splashes off that one of the members had and save some heals and utility, and one can hold. Now being isolated right there again just isn't ideal for trios, and you see that the trio that was tight at the beginning ended up winning this engagement just again because they got the pre-fight damage. They were tighter, they were all coordinated in their fighting, and everything was just kind of disorganized and chaotic, unfortunately, for Binsniffer's trio. Well guys, that is going to do it for today's VOD review. I hope you did enjoy this video and this content. If you did, please drop a like on this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on post notifications. And I'll see you for the next viewer VOD review. Peace.